The meeting between President Biden and his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, was seen as a good sign by the traders who make bets on the financial markets. The leaders of the world's two largest economies met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Indonesia Monday. Stock markets in the U.S. and China were up today on the hopes that tensions between the rival countries may have been reduced, which could lead to increased economic activity. For more, I want to bring in Eswar Prasad. He is the Tolani Senior Professor of Trade Policy at Cornell University and the former head of the IMF's China Division. So, Eswar, I want to start with this, I guess, reaction that the markets had. I'm always nervous about imputing rational decisions to the market, but I want to ask you if the decision that perhaps the meeting between Xi and President Biden was a good sign, was that just a reaction to good atmospherics, or do you think there was something that actually might have changed between those two countries that will affect the economy?
Well, John, it's certainly a very good sign that they are talking, because open lines of communication, especially at the top levels, are very important to make sure that there are no misunderstandings that blow up into something bigger. I think we should see this realistically for what it is, which is a leveling off rather than a de-escalation of hostilities. Because fundamentally, if you think about economic issues and geopolitical issues, the two sides see things very differently. But there is a very important element that has come out of this meeting, which is that I think there seems to be an intention on both sides to bifurcate the issues that they don't agree on, but then think about making progress in areas where they do have some degree of agreement. So for instance, on climate change, both sides seem to share the view that certain things can be done by the governments, both individually and jointly. So the fact that we can parcel out things where there are going to be tensions and talk about them and try to make constructive progress in areas where there is agreement, I think that is overall going to be a good thing.
So there may be heavy competition, but it won't be madness. It will happen within some clearly defined lines. Let me ask you a question about Goldman Sachs made a judgment about inflation. They said that they are expecting a significant decline in inflation in the United States. And their argument is that that's because some of the supply chain issues, supply chain being the steps in production for goods, have been fixed. Do you read that? A, do you agree with that? And B, because supply chain is now a global phenomenon, do you think that has implications? Do you think there's any chance that the supply chain is improving, not just for the U.S., but for the world?
So these things are connected. China is an important part of the supply chain. And I think one of the reasons we are seeing a positive reaction in financial markets is not only was there a Xi-Biden meeting, but also yesterday it looked like China might back off a little bit from its zero COVID policy. They've since reversed that and gone back to taking a hard line on it. But certainly supply constraints around the world are beginning to ease. And at the same time, measures taken by many central banks, including the U.S. Federal Reserve, are beginning to bite. We've seen significant increases in interest rates that's dampening demand for housing, for autos, for a variety of consumption goods as well. So now you have supply constraints easing, at the same time demand is coming down. So it is plausible that inflationary pressures might start easing up. But I think it's far too early yet to declare victory over inflation, because the problem with inflation is that if people expect inflation to be high in the future, that ends up creating a dynamic of its own. And that's what the Fed is trying very hard to break. So I'm hopeful that Goldman Sachs will be right, but it's far from obvious at this stage.
So with that perfect context in mind, Fed Vice Chair Lael Brainerd said, or signaled anyway, that the Fed could soon slow the pace of interest rate increases. Do you see that? Well, how do you see that? And also, what does that mean if the Fed is going to start raising rates at a smaller amount? How does that affect other economies around the world?
So there are two important elements to what you just said, John. One is that the Fed is probably going to continue raising rates, but not at as aggressive a pace as they have been doing recently. But certainly the Fed is also concerned about tipping the economy into a recession. And the problem with monetary policy, with interest rate hikes by the Fed, is that sometimes it takes a while for their effects on economic activity and inflation to be realized. So the Fed is as concerned about over-tightening as it is about doing too little. Now, with the Fed hiking interest rates, that does have an effect on the dollar. The dollar has increased quite significantly in value against practically every other major currency. And this creates problems for many countries around the world. Many of these countries have imports whose prices are denominated in dollars, so their imports cost more. This creates even more inflation for them. Many developing countries have debt that is denominated in dollars, which means that in their domestic currency, if the domestic currency's value is falling, they have to pay even more of their domestic currency to service those debts. So the rising dollar certainly creates a lot of complications for the rest of the world.
All right, Eswar Prasad, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.